Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. This week on the show, I'm joined by Benji Backer and Ben Cassidy of the newly formed nonprofit Nature is Nonpartisan, and we're discussing the importance of and the methods for making nature nonpartisan once again. All right, welcome back to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by First Light and their Camo for Conservation initiative. And today we are continuing our Conservation Month series. We've talked whitetails, we've talked public lands, and today we are taking things in what I think is a really exciting direction. And I think it's a really important direction because this is a conversation about bringing the environmental movement and conservation and public lands advocacy and all of these things, taking them out of the partisan football, bickering, name-calling, our team versus your team kind of world in which they have lived for a long time, and instead looking for ways to bring this stuff back into the middle as a nonpartisan or bipartisan set of issues that all of us can engage in, whether you feel like you're on the blue side or the red side or somewhere in between, regardless of who's in office. What can we all gather around and move forward on? That is the broad set of ideas and topics that we're discussing today. And we're discussing it with a couple folks who are doing something very exciting related to all this. And that is Benji Backer and Ben Cassidy. Both of them are here from a brand new organization that is actually publicly launching today when this podcast drops on March 20th, 2025. And Benji is the founder of Nature is Nonpartisan, and Ben is the chief policy officer for the new organization. And we're going to have them on here on the show in a moment to talk about a whole bunch of different things that I think are very relevant to people who hunt or fish or care about wildlife or open lands, public lands, the ability to hike, fish, camp, hunt, any of those things. This is stuff that is very pertinent to us, that has a direct impact on our ability to do those things and have healthy wildlife and healthy wild places to do them in. So let me give you a little bit of interesting background about these guys and why I wanted to have them on the show to have this conversation. So Benji has an interesting background and story that led to him as a pretty young person starting a conservation organization called the American Conservation Coalition. And this was, I think, one of the very first right of center organizations focused on tackling environmental and climate related issues and looking at it through a lens of maybe more conservative values or ideas. And he started that and was wildly successful, given maybe certain headwinds within that side of the aisle. When it comes to those issues, he was able to gather tens of thousands of members to be involved in this organization and get folks in Congress and with our, various parts of our elected officials to engage on these issues in certain ways. So he has this very interesting background there. Ben Cassidy came from another set of interesting ideas and backgrounds in that he is a hunter himself. He has worked as an executive vice president with the Safari Club. He also worked in the Department of the Interior during the first Trump administration. So he worked, back during that period, within the government and saw what was done, how it was done, and why things got done. Now, given those two perspectives that the both of them have, they saw that there were many things that were getting caught up in the partisan BS. My words, not theirs. But they saw issues and places and causes that they both cared about related to the environment and the natural world that got pushed one way or the other because Democrats were traditionally behind it, or because Republicans were traditionally behind it, or because the two parties couldn't get together and just have a conversation about this stuff. And so Benji decided to start an organization that would try to open this discourse, to bring these sides together, to find, as they call it, the coalition of the willing, that 80% in the middle who just care about these things and want to find ways to move them forward, regardless of, if it's a D or R in the office. And so they started Nature is Nonpartisan. The idea of it is something I'm really excited about. If you've been a longtime listener to this podcast, If you've been following me and my career and my books and the different things I work on, you know that I strongly believe in this idea that we can achieve so much more when we put the partisan labels and BS aside and instead focus on our shared values and having open conversations about the things we care about and getting creative about solutions. Nothing gets done when we name call and finger point and get behind enemy lines or get behind our own party lines and point fingers at the other side and blame everything at them. Calling Republicans evil demagogues who are going to destroy the world, and then not engaging with them on anything isn't getting anything done. Calling Democrats crazy snowflakes and libtards or whatever kind of thing you want to call them and saying we're never going to work with them because they're ruining the world, that's not going to help you either. If we can instead remember that we are all just humans, we are all people that come from different perspectives. Our lives have been informed by different experiences and different stories that we've kind of learned about how the world works. We all have this different lens that we're looking at the world through. It doesn't mean we're evil, doesn't mean that we're bad. It just means we see things differently. If we can talk about it and be open to these different ways of seeing the world, we can probably find some common ground. We can probably find some ways to help achieve all sorts of different priorities. And that's, I think, what a lot of this comes down to when it comes to the politics of the environment and public lands and wildlife and clean air and clean water, all that kind of stuff, right? Because we all have different perspectives, we all have different priorities. And the only way that we're ever going to, get something done is not by demeaning and attacking people simply because they come from a worldview or from a background that has different sets of priorities, but instead by talking about it, by working together, by doing the hard work of tackling issues that aren't necessarily easy, but that can be overcome by people talking, people working, people compromising, people getting to understand where we're all coming from. That's how most good things in our country have gotten done over the years. And unfortunately, when it comes to the environment, that's not happened a whole lot. Sometimes it does, but a lot of this stuff's got pulled into one side or the other. And Nature's Nonpartisan, I'm very excited about this mission that they have is to really change that and to find ways to move the ball forward, to get positive things done for the environment, no matter what party's in office. So they are going to work with Democrats. They are going to work with Republicans. If the Biden administration was around, they'd be working with them right now. The Trump administration is in right now, so they're going to work with the Trump administration. And interestingly, and what I think is a strong signal of of what these guys are trying to do, they have a staff and leadership and board of directors and group of advisors that are split between more conservative people and liberal people. So they are being directed, they are being informed, and they are building their plans from this bipartisan perspective. They have people with conservative ideas and liberal ideas. They've got people in the middle and all points in between. And I think that's a great idea. I think that's something that can lead to this thing actually working. And because of all that, I've volunteered my perspectives and ideas as a strategic advisor to their organization. So I'm going to be stepping in and helping and hopefully being a voice for hunters and anglers within this organization, making sure that our interests are well voiced and that we can be doing good things for fish and wildlife and hunting and fishing and the natural world and all those other things that we care so much about. So that is a long-winded way of giving you the background on how all this came to be, why I'm excited about having this conversation, why I'm excited about you guys hearing this one today, because I think it will hopefully, not only introduce you to this organization, but also inspire you to think about things a little bit differently, to think about ways that we can engage no matter who our elected officials are, no matter who your neighbors are, no matter who the people are down the road with a different flag flying, right? I've got some flags in my neighborhood that say nasty things about the past president. I've got some flags flying in my neighborhood that say nasty things about the current president. I'm going to engage with any and all of them because I care a lot about these things that we're here to talk about today. Hunting, fishing, fish, wildlife, public lands, the natural world. And I'm going to do anything I can, and I would hope that a lot of you listening would too, to help those causes regardless of whatever political situation we're in. That's what we're going to discuss today. And as I promised last week during our podcast with Cal, that discussion with me and Ryan was all about defense. How do we play defense for public lands and the environment? Again, regardless of who's in office, how do we make sure that our elected officials are held accountable for potentially concerning or bad decisions when it comes to our environment or public lands? Now, today, we're going to take the opposite approach, which is how do we go on the offensive? This is something I think is really cool about what Benji and Ben are doing. They're going to find ways they can move the ball forward. What are the wins that we can find? Rather than raising red flags, rather than raising concerns, which are important, again, no matter who's in office, they are important, and other organizations and individuals can do that. But Nature's Nonpartisan is going to take the approach of, okay, let's figure out what can get done and let's move that forward. No matter who we have to work with, let's get something good done. So that's what we discuss. We dive into some specific opportunities, some specific places and ways that, the natural world and the environment and maybe public lands and wildlife can get some wins over the next few years if we all do our job and inform our elected officials of what our priorities are and how these can help the administration achieve theirs. That's what we discuss. So this is going to be a positive, optimistic, forward-thinking conversation about how we can get good stuff done these next 4 years. And then, no matter who wins the next election, we're going to keep the ball moving forward. And we're going to do that by bringing conservatives and liberals and independents all together on the things we can agree on and the things we can move forward to make sure that we have fish, that we have wildlife, that we have clean air, clean water, open public lands, and everything we need to keep this incredible set of traditions that we have thriving and available for all of us into the future, as well as a healthy planet for all of us and our kids to live on too. Is that much to ask for? I think not. So, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Benji Backer and Ben Cassidy of Nature is Nonpartisan. All right, with me on the line, we've got Benji Backer and Ben Cassidy. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Mark.
I'm excited about this one because as both of you had to hear from me at one point on the phone as I rattled on about my thoughts around this topic, I have long wanted there to be a more bipartisan movement or nonpartisan movement around the natural world, the environment, hunting, fishing, public lands, all that kind of stuff. And it just seems like it's been too long since that's been the case. So I will open by saying thank you. I'm excited. And then to you, why? Why now? Why in this moment when the world seems more polarized than ever? The news, the social media, everything seems like a constant fire alarm. There are a lot of legitimate things going on that are cause for questions and debate and discussion and all that stuff. But it's a moment where maybe some people might think, why in the world would you try to launch something like this right now? So that's my question to you, I guess, to start, Benji, is why this right now?
Well, I think the why is more important than ever before. I feel like, the division that we're seeing, the polarization that we're seeing is the exact reason why we need this organization. I mean, you go back to history, you look at the environment, and it was not caught up in culture wars. It transcended that. We always use the statistic, but 78% of Americans self-identified as environmentalists in 1990. 78%. And today it's less than 40%, and it's decreasing. And that's because the issue has been caught up in partisanship for far too long. And the reality is when you have that ping pong back and forth of like extreme right versus extreme left on any issue, but especially the environment, you don't get good results. You either get radical results that are undone by the next, governor or president or Congress, or you just don't get any action whatsoever. And our environment deserves better than partisan politics. Our environment deserves better than culture wars. Our environment deserves better than being ineffective every time that a preferred candidate wins or loses an election. And the reality is that we're in this moment of extreme division. No one thinks that it's possible for us to come together on any issue, let alone the environment. But this is an issue where we can do it. We're going to prove all those people wrong, and we're going to show maybe politicians and others that there's an incentive in doing the right thing. What we're going to do with Nature is Nonpartisan is build the largest nonpartisan environmental organization that America has ever seen. We are going to evenly split everything that we do, conservative to liberal. So for every conservative we have involved, we'll have a liberal person involved. Our grassroots base that we recruit will be similar to that, because when you have a evenly split, truly nonpartisan group, you can actually forge the change you want. You can actually get realistic solutions, and you don't leave people off the table. For so long on this issue, conservatives have felt targeted by top-down government regulation and like coastal elites telling them what to do. For far too long, liberals have felt left behind by conservatives not even being at the table whatsoever, and basically just trying to undo everything that the left has done. Like, neither side is being productive. We're going to change that incentive structure, and we're going to make nature a nonpartisan issue again. And that includes environment, that includes conservation, that includes all these adjacent issues that have been unnecessarily wrapped up in this. And the time couldn't be more perfect for this because of how polarizing it is. That's why we're starting this. The last thing I'll say on this is, I don't need to start a nonprofit. I've already started one, which we can get into. I didn't have a dream of starting a second nonprofit. This is truly to fill a void that exists. This is the necessary time. It probably should have been started 5 or 10 years ago, but we need to move fast to make this issue nonpartisan, and someone's got to do it. And why not the team of Ben, Benji, Mark, and everyone else that's involved?
What about you, Ben? What's your take on this? Because you came from, previous successful positions as well. You didn't have to get yourself all tangled up and try to somehow balance the thoughts and ideas and voices of liberals and conservatives and everyone in between. That doesn't seem like an easy way to spend your days as a father.
No, but I mean, it matters as a father, right, for the next generation, and kind of just build off of what Benji was saying. And being in Washington, D.C., I've traveled all over the country. I mean, there is a extreme disconnect, I would say, between what people are saying and thinking and decisions that are being made in D.C. I think that right now a lot of the dialogue around environment's kind of held hostage by a vocal minority, and I think it ends up working to the detriment of the environment. And just seeing, since since the start of the year, getting involved with Nature Nonpartisan, joining the team, just seeing from people how excited they are to have a place to land, a place where the conversation can have. I feel like this, right now there's a cultural movement where people want to roll up their sleeves. They don't mind the hard work. They'll have those conversations to find a path forward. And that was really, my drive for this is I love being able to facilitate that wide spectrum of folks that care about something, right? To a level where they'll put differences aside and they'll work towards it. I mean, my background comes in being, sportsman. And I always say it as a joke, but mean it seriously too. It's like nobody can love the land. Nobody loves wildlife more than a sportsman. You can love it as much as we do, but you can't love it more. With that, though, I have those conversations. And like Benji said, like, the team we have is made up of the full political backgrounds, right? I'm a conservative. We have folks on the team that are liberal. And it's been just amazing to just have just the daily interactions talking about what, ties us to nature, what inspires us. And then to just have in the culture of our team and just like this clear-eyed vision of this needs to be done and we will lead by example on it. And I really just commend Benji for, really, really taking the mantle with this. And it's inspiring just to see, what it's building in terms of support. So I would say, there's never been a better time or a more important time to do this.
Add on to that, Ben. Like this is not easy. Like even internally, Ben, we can admit like it's not always easy having these conversations. It's actually very uncomfortable. But that doesn't happen anymore, right? Like we used to debate solutions and actually come to some sort of compromise. Such a bad word these days. So whatever synonym that is. But we used to come to some sort of compromise.
We can reclaim compromise.
I know. I wish compromise was not a dirty word, but we used to be able to do that and strike some sort of balance. We're doing that every single day on our team, our board. Like we have former Trump cabinet members and Obama, Biden people on the same board, Sierra Club and Trump on the same board. Like it's Trump people on the same board. But people are like, how does that work? It must be just absolutely nuts. I mean, it was so funny at our last board call. We had the former conservative leaders and the Sierra Club, former Sierra Club CEO all agreeing on something on the same call. And it's just like these sorts of things are people don't realize how possible they are. But even when they're not, it's not some kumbaya bridge building thing for the sake of like building good relationships with each other because we want to be happy. It's like, no, this is to get things done. It's uncomfortable. There's some really tough conversations we've got to have. But if we're going to protect all of America, which includes rural communities and urban communities, which includes national parks and private lands, which includes state parks and wildlife corridors, which includes farmers and ranchers and people living in downtown New York City, if we're going to protect all those places, conserve all those places, all those different people have to be represented in the environmental dialogue. That hasn't happened in so long. So let's get uncomfortable. Let's be a little bit out of our element. Let's put unlikely people together because it might not be easy, but we're going to be able to actually get some things done and put other issues aside to find a common goal.
Yeah. It's I guess I refer to it as a radically practical mindset where you need to set aside maybe labels or identity or political party or whatever other identifier you want and simply look at, hey, what's going to move the ball forward? What's going to get us closer to the goal line? And to your point, oftentimes it means a little bit of give and take, open communication, recognizing what our shared values are. And oftentimes, if you just push away and push aside all of these other like preconceived notions, I'm sure you guys are seeing this within your own organization, you start to realize, oh, hey, we might not be able to do everything we all want to do, but we could probably move forward on 75% of it, and we'll get there faster, more effectively together. But you bring up one of the major questions that I had for you, which is given all of that, given that is all what we all three at least believe to be true, the how is, the devil's in the details, right? So internally, how are you guys negotiating and navigating some of the specifics around, hey, are we going to support this thing or this thing? Do we want to be against this thing or against that thing? Or like, how are you handling what I guess what I'm getting at is help us all learn to better work with folks that are different from us. What have you guys learned about that?
Well, I think first of all, it's setting the intent. It's a really important question. And if we cracked the code, we'd be billionaires and, teaching people how to work with each other and solving people's marriages and, Thanksgiving dinners that they can't talk to their families at. Like, so we haven't fully figured it out. But what I will say is that one thing that's going to differentiate us that people are going to notice is that we are explicitly going to be for things. That is what Nature's Nonpartisan is meant to be. There's enough groups pushing back. There's legal entities. There's litigation. There's, TAC ads, all that stuff. It's easier to raise money for that stuff. Believe me, I could easily raise more money for a nonprofit if we did that. We are going to be for things because it's easier to bring people together and get historic change done when you're working for something rather than against something. And you can actually build constituencies that way. And over the long haul, it actually gets more done. I understand that there are bad things that happen, right? Benji, why would you not at least oppose some of the most horrific things possible? Well, the reality is if we constantly are opposing things, it's distracting us from the time that we could spend being for things. And it's also, burning bridges in the short term and in the long term rather than building bridges for the long term. And so that's a huge differentiator. The other differentiator is that we're not trying to aim for some big like one goal, right? Like we're not saying we need a Green New Deal or we need to, undo the Green New Deal, right? It's like we don't have like one specific policy goal. We're saying, okay, it's 2025, it's March. What is the best opportunity for us to make the most impact on a policy level right now that we can advocate for that Americans agree on? That will look different in 2 years than it does right now, depending on who's president, depending on who's in Congress, and depending on who's a governor, right? So let's take the current moment we're in and try to maximize the amount of outcome that we can get. So the good example of this at the federal level, you've got a president who invested in national parks his last term, who talks about clean air and clean water, who talks about the importance of outdoor recreation and talks about the importance of farmers, right? Take some of that. You've got Republicans in Congress with slim majorities. Take that. Now, within those realities, what could you get done on a bipartisan basis? That will be different if Kamala would have won in 2024, and Republicans have the Senate and Democrats had the House or something. So trying to maximize the moment you're in, no matter who's in office, and being for things has been a huge unifier for our team because it allows us to say, we can disagree on X, Y, or Z, but 80% of Americans want action on protecting national parks and restoring, parklands. We as a team believe that too. Let's go and fight for that. So that's the sort of approach that we have.
That makes a lot of sense. Ben, would you add anything there?
Yeah, I would just say, for like I would lean on my past experience in working with different groups to find common ground to work towards, and it goes a lot to what Benji was saying. But I previously worked at Department of the Interior, right? And I pretty quickly saw that you're going to have full like buy-in from the spectrum. You're not going to get full buy-in, but you have to have it reflective of just like the American people and the variety of opinions there. And I approached it with the baseline of, hey, like baseline, we all agree that we want healthier environment. We all want more abundant wildlife. We want restored ecosystems. And then I would kind of speed date with a lot of, of these large legacy NGOs and say, okay, speed date, want to meet with everybody, top 5 priorities, lay them out. And I kind of like cross reference them and see where the common ground was, and a lot of that would lead to good legacy wins that people, that you wouldn't expect to be celebrating together were celebrating together. I'm talking about, like a Great American Outdoors Act, or, one that I'm super fond of is migration corridors, right? I mean, there's very
So
different
great.
approach. There's a very different approach to migration corridors, though, right? You could have a land designation, or you could have states kind of lead, and private landowners and state authorities and all the different federal agencies working together. And we got to a place where Secretarial Order 3362 was signed, that everybody was signing. Was it perfect for both sides? No. I mean, there were cattlemen that we're seeing black helicopters on it, not trusting it, seeing it as a land grab. There were folks saying this ought to be a land grab. It's not a land grab, But at the middle, and the actual majority was saying like, wow, this is awesome. And it was really cool. When Biden came into office and he put out his executive order on America the Beautiful, that was one item that carried over. It was celebrated in there. It was a Trump initiative that then became, a Biden initiative. And we see Congressman Ryan Zinke introducing legislation on it and trying to codify it, put more money into it. So it's wins like that. And like where those start though are in the conversations across the board, not just with your friends, but also folks that you normally don't talk to kind of just try to suss out where the common ground is.
Yeah. And something you mentioned, Benji, I think is really important, back to kind of the practicality of a lot of this, and that being the fact that when certain initiatives get pushed through, especially by executive action, and if they are far to one side or the other, they tend to have this pendulum swing where something gets put in place and then a year later or 2 years later, it's gone. And then a new administration comes in and then something else is put in place. And then nothing really happens because it's just yo-yoing back and forth. But, when you find things like that example right there, Ben, that has support on both sides, it can be enduring. And that's where real change actually happens. And I mean, from all sides, there's some ideas that I wish got introduced and stuck around. I'll be bummed that some things disappear. And then there's other things that, hey, this is a great idea. And there's always going to be some of that no matter what. But all it said, the next, I think, natural question then is, because this idea sounds great in practice, the perspective, the aim, the approach makes a whole hell of a lot of sense. But I'm curious about how this actually happens. How do we influence folks, elected officials, or whoever else we need to be talking to get some of these things done? What is the Nature's Nonpartisan playbook? And I'm not looking for the specific opportunities right now. Like I don't want to talk about this particular bill or that particular proposal, but what's like in your toolbox to influence, whether it's the Trump administration right now, or if it's someone new 4 years from now or 10 years from now, whoever it is, whatever party, what's the toolbox that you guys are bringing to the table?
It's a really good question. I think I would start out by saying we want to make it cool in American politics to work across the aisle on this stuff. We want to show politicians that they will be rewarded by working across the aisle. We want to celebrate bipartisan wins. We want to have cool celebrities and influencers that people look up to engaged. We want to have really amazing content and kind of a brand that people want to identify with. An optimistic, forward-looking, truly, a brand that people in America are proud to identify with if they care about the environment. And just show politicians, because right now their incentive is to divide, right? Their incentive is to go on social media and say, these Green New Deal radicals are coming for your land, or, these people are trying to drill on national parks and, take away all of the environment that we have, right? Like that's really, those are the two messages that are incentivized right now. Let's create a third incentive, an incentive to get things done. So we want to make it cool to be pro-environment from a nonpartisan way. It used to be, and I think that it's partially a branding thing. The other thing that I think, the tactic we're going to use is really be a proxy for the entire conservation and environmental community. We have a goal by the end of this year to be the main driver of connecting people to other NGOs that are doing the on the ground work that people want to get involved with. I think about my peer group of, millennial, Gen Z. I'm kind of a zillennial or whatever they say. People are really interested in getting involved on this issue. They have zero idea where to start. If you search local conservation group on Google, you're going to have 85 different options. So we're going to build out a system, software, where people can very easily get tailored to a nonprofit that is relevant for their geography, for whatever interests they have, whatever political leaning they have, whatever, topic, whatever. That will be really helpful, because we'll be able to be a proxy for all these other NGOs that are doing great work, largely at the local level, but some at the national level too. But we'll also be able to maximize people's impact if they're interested in being involved. You look at these like Nature Conservancy or Sierra Club or these traditional NGOs, they have millions of members, but they don't actually do anything about it. And so our goal is to make it super easy for people to be active in the environmental community. So we want to make it cool, and we also want to make it easy to be active. And, at the end of the day, politicians react to fear and incentives. And we're not going to play the fear game, but we do want to show them that there's, by the end of this year, we said 1 million Americans we want in our network, whether that's 1 million, 10 million, or all, a few 100 million that live in this country. We want people in Congress to realize that there is a huge constituency out there that will support them. But the other thing is, most people don't even know when something good happens, right? Like most people maybe the people listening to this do, but the Great American Outdoors Act, most people have no idea that happened. Mm-hmm. Most people have no idea that President Biden worked with Republicans on a pro-nuclear policy last year. Like those ideas don't sell. So while we're building out our organization, we're also going to sell these big bipartisan wins so that people can actually hear about them and be the sounding board for good news on the environment, not just for the sake of selling good news, but for the sake of rewarding people who deserve to be rewarded for doing the right thing.
Yeah, and you mentioned this earlier, and I think right there it's worth bringing up again the fact that there is this need for celebrating wins and for celebrating the potential and the opportunities, and there's also a need for accountability, right? You need the other side. You need folks to play defense or to call a spade a spade. I think it's important for the general public to do both, right? I think as an individual citizen, at least I personally feel a responsibility to talk to whoever my lawmakers are and say, yes, I love this. No, don't love that so much. I think that's important. But from an organizational standpoint, I think it makes a lot of sense seeing that there's this opportunity, there's this vacuum where there's not a lot of people, incentivizing doing the right thing. There's just a lot of the fear-based thing, which you mentioned. And that's kind of covered. We've got organizations that are doing that on both sides in their own different way. So I'm glad that there's someone here who can fill that void. Now, to you, Ben, as a follow-up to what Benji was just discussing, to this toolbox, what levers are you guys going to pull? What tools do you have at your disposal? I'm curious about that. And then also a little bit more around maybe around like a theory of influence, because you worked within the previous administration.
Yeah.
You've seen this from the inside, and I'm curious about what you guys can do now, given your experience and what you've seen, and also having people on your board who have, worked with both nonprofits and previous administrations and different things like that. How do you become the most influential conservation organization in this kind of way? What actually creates change?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, I think that the opportunity that lays in front of us is showing folks that when a president comes in, regardless who the president is, it doesn't mean that for a certain segment of population that the switch is on or off. That there's always opportunity, and that there's willing folks and organizations that are out there right now that are always going to have the approach of being constructive and not obstructive. They're going to look for avenues to work through whatever the political makeup is to get our issues across. I think that the onus is on us to show that this is the winning issue, but I have all the faith in the world that it is, just based off of, again, where people stand on the issues and the coalition that we have in place. For, say, like this current administration, I make the point all the time. It's not mincing its words. They'll say what their number one priority is, and they'll say energy dominance. That could be argued about elsewhere. But I also point out that, this isn't new. It was also the top priority during the first term, right? But what I point out is, even if that being a top priority, it kind of plays out in a multiple use sort of fashion, where you end up having a lot of conservation wins happen at the same time. So I challenge folks that care about, nature and the environment and conserving it for future generations to really take the opportunity to express their voice and find ways to be able to secure those wins during this period of time, because it's happened before and we can do it even better this time around.
Yeah. It just seems, why throw your hands up and say, these next 4 years are going to suck, no matter who's whatever, no matter what team you're on, right? Whether you're happy with this administration or not, it does not seem particularly productive, in my view, to say, well, everything's going to go to hell.
If I can just add to that for a second, like, I was on a call today with a potential funder, and they were like, well, the first 2 months prove that nothing is possible over the next 4 years. And that sort of thinking is so broken in American politics. That's like saying, Mark, because you had a bad morning today, you're going to have a bad afternoon as well.
Yeah.
Like, just because you don't like something that someone did today doesn't mean that you can't get them to do something that you want them to do tomorrow. And that doesn't mean that you still can't call out the thing that you didn't like today. I think, like, a really good example from one of my travels recently was I was in Florida speaking at an event with one of the most far left members of the state legislature. And she goes, I hate Ron DeSantis on everything except for resiliency and conservation.
Yeah, he's been good on the
Everglades. You can still hate him on the other stuff. And even within his own issue, you could dislike, some of the stuff.
Yep.
But you don't need to, like, write everything off because you didn't like something that somebody did, especially the first month or two of an administration. And that's true for conservatives too. They do the same thing when Democrats are in office. And those two things are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
Can I just piggyback on that real quick too? I mean, like, one thing that I've learned, having worked in and outside of government, is not to follow the assumption that an administration is a monolith, that it all speaks with just one voice. I'll say, like, during my time at Interior, I had some of the most rewarding but difficult debates. I'm talking about bare knuckle brawls with other people that were also in the administration over policy issues, over land use issues. They're not all just agreed on and resolved, right? These things are dynamic. They're happening in real time. And, they need to be reflective of what people want because they're serving us. Yeah. But yeah, a lot of folks will just think that it's just, black or white, red or blue. But a lot of thought and fight goes into it. And it's the onus is on us as the community to have that voice at the table. If you're not sitting at the table, you're served on the table, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So with that beautiful framing in mind, then, with us wanting to be sitting at the table and not on the plate, let's talk about opportunities. Let's talk about what is possible right now, because there's a lot of people who think what you just said, Benji, is true, which is, man, nothing great is going to happen for the environment right now because of the heavy prioritization on development and energy and the economy and stuff like that, which of course is all important. Other people can debate that and the details there. But yeah, there have been examples and various things proposed that seem concerning from an environmental perspective. but there certainly are opportunities too. Give me some good news. Give me some places where we can have wins. If we do our jobs, if you guys do what you're going to do, how do we turn frowns upside down? What are the places where we can get those wins?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question because I mean, since the election was over, we've been putting our heads together with unlikely stakeholders to figure out what the opportunities really are. And it's no secret that and it's probably not popular for me to say this, but it definitely fits the bill of the nonpartisan nature of our organization. I haven't really enjoyed the last 3 elections and our options for president, and yet when the election was over, we were like, okay, well, what can we make happen? Even though we haven't launched yet, even though we aren't an organization, we had I think 1 or 2 full-time staff at the time. We barely had created the legal entity. And so we started meeting with Democrats in the Senate, in the House, Republicans in the Senate, in the House, and the Trump administration to figure out what those opportunities are. And there's actually a significant amount there. Now, again, kind of ignoring everything that's already happened and all the noise and all the rhetoric, President Trump did sign into law the last administration, the largest investment into national parks in recent history. He did block Bristol Bay from being developed from a mining perspective. He had a lot of, involvement in Everglades restoration and other conservation. He and his team want to build on that legacy. And of course, you can argue that he hasn't built on it during those first couple months of this year. You could argue that. But we are seeing substantial interest from the administration on buying into a historic investment in wildlife protection, in ecosystem restoration, in supporting farmers with sustainable agriculture, in cleaning our air and our water. Obviously, it's part of his messaging. In supporting rural and urban communities in terms of having more, supported green space and barriers against extreme storms, infrastructure for water. I mean, these are like big things that need action, right? And so climate people are going to be like, oh, that's not good enough. And, we're not, setting aside enough land, and we're not, scaling clean energy enough or whatever. And people on the right are, when this hopefully happens, which I think it will soon in terms of him unveiling this agenda. And I believe that this will turn the discourse around as well. Whether the discourse has been fair or not is up to debate, probably on a case by case basis. But this kind of he's tearing down everything for the environment, I think will change once we have this very positive progress made. But I mean, these are real issues that need to be solved, right? I mean, our biodiversity is at risk increasingly more and more every single day. Our public lands are undermanaged and undervalued from a funding perspective, but they also are probably overmanaged from a red tape perspective, for lack of a better term. We call it green tape, to be able to actually go and manage those places and make sure that forest fires don't happen. I mean, all these are big ideas that need attention, that the president is willing to work on, that we've seen so much interest on, and it's genuine interest. It's not like, a facade. They actually want to get this done. Now, I'm not going to applaud that until it gets done. But I do want to just say, and I hope that this is true once it happens, if it happens, we have had so much interest from Democrat-leaning organizations who say, look, I'm really upset with what's going on this issue and others, but we will be there to support that if that can happen. And so many conservatives who are like, thank goodness, we are so excited about having something to be for. People are excited about this, and we're calling it "Make America Beautiful" again to also meet the moment and meet people where they're at. And the people who matter in this situation are the Republicans in leadership. And there's a real opportunity to kind of change the discourse. And if President Trump invested in this historic investment in all those different issue areas that I just outlined, I think it would make a huge, meaningful change in changing the narrative nationally that this issue has to be partisan. Because in so many people's minds, he is the least likely to do it. I would argue that there's a lot of proof that he is willing to engage on this stuff. But even if you think that or not, him acting on this with some Democrats, even just a few, would make a huge difference in changing the discourse of this for decades to come, I think.
Yeah. And I think, and you would hope that if this happens, that you would see that celebration from the other side too, right? Because like we were talking earlier, at least I'll speak for myself as an individual. I think it's important to call a spade when you're not happy with an elected official about something. regardless of if it's a D or R, but vice versa. So, hey, if all of a sudden we're going to see the person that we don't think is going to do something good for clean air, water, or the public lands or whatever, if they do, heck yeah, I don't care who does it. I don't care if you're wearing red or blue.
You shouldn't care. No one should care.
I just want the thing. I just want the thing to get done. I think approaching these things from a issue by issue perspective is so much. It makes a whole lot more sense to me than this. Is my team in the lead or your team in the lead? I don't think that's helping anyone. That said, the devil is in the details on this kind of stuff. So, Ben, can you speak in any more detail on some of the specifics here? Like Benji just said, hey, we're getting interest from the current administration on doing good things for wildlife or doing good things for clean air and clean water, etc. Can you, are you in a position to speak to any specific, bills that might be getting some extra support if they were to go forward on this? Or is there any proposal or executive order or anything tangible that you guys are pushing for right now that you think has a pathway to success in the near future?
Well, yeah, I just backtracked to what Benji was saying too, and about meeting the moment. I would say, one thing that's going to happen during the next 4 years is the 250th birthday. I think like what that is going to do for the country is really raise the conversation around patriotism, what it means to be American. And I think a lot of people forget, and it's a great time to re-educate or educate folks on it, is, stewardship is American. It was revolutionary what we did in this country. When you go back to Teddy Roosevelt's legacy, in creating the national park system, wildlife refuges, just the North American model of conservation. These are some of our greatest exports. I've traveled all over the world and talked to wildlife management authorities, and they look to us as being that gold standard. And I really think it's a chance to give the current state of things a sober-eyed view of where issues need to be addressed, and then work towards solutions towards them. So in terms of like specifics on policy, I'm not going to dictate them, from our perch, but we're going to find that common ground policies to move forward on. I would say, starting points though would be building off of successes that we saw in the last administration that carried through this administration. I would also look at, natural solutions to a lot of the crises that we face now, where nature turns on us in a way, in a superpower sort of sense, is dangerous. Talking about like wildfires, we saw, if you want to talk about specific legislation, like in the House, the Fix Our Forests Act, one of the first bills that was even voted on, I think that it came one vote short of being able to pass on suspension out of the House. It would have had, a number of Democrat members not been back in their districts, dealing with the aftermath of the fires. We'll see that move over to the Senate now. Imagine, in their own, fashion, they'll get it out of there and over to the president's desk. There's unfinished business from the last term. If you look at like Trillion Trees, there's an executive order on that. Work out of EPA on ocean plastics. Great American Outdoors Act, that's up for reauthorization. There's going to be a sober look at it, right? I mean, I don't know if the math changed or what went into it, but the deferred maintenance backlog has doubled since it was passed, and that was really what it was meant to address, or a big portion of it. So, how can we direct those funds more effectively? I don't think that the list of opportunities is short at all. But it's a matter of, again, coalescing folks that are representing millions of hunters, anglers, conservationists, outdoor enthusiasts, and finding those solutions to push forward. And really, a lot of what Benji's put together here is that chorus that's going to celebrate and to remind folks in DC that this is the voice of the people. This is what we expect. We want government to work for us.
And I think, the key first step to unlocking a lot of this, because a lot of these ideas are being proposed in bipartisan policies. People don't realize it. And as a C3, we can't like lobby for those, but I'm, telling the public that they're out there. There's a lot of bipartisan bills on this stuff. They often don't get through because it's not as big of a priority as slamming the other side or, playing in the partisan sandbox on other issues. Our goal is to have the president give a mandate not a mandate to that's from him to dictate all the environmental action, but to say, hey, Congress, we want you to act on these core subjects, some of the ones that I talked about earlier. Hey, cabinet secretaries, we want you to act on this, so that he's basically setting the precedent that he wants this to be a priority during the next 2 and 4 years. That's kind of the first step. So that mandate, is something that we're seeing a lot of interest on, just because it sets a vision, right? It allows everything to be packaged underneath the same sort of vision, and it allows people to work within it, and it sets some goals and parameters that are a little bit more broad, like I had talked about earlier. But I don't think anything's off the table, really. Like, we're seeing a lot of interest. There's a laundry list of ideas. There's a lot of great NGOs that have put together great ideas. We're basically giving the administration, hey, here are a lot of great ideas. And, we don't need you to buy into every single one of them or like every one of them, but which ones do you like? And so we'll have a little bit more clarity on that in the next few weeks. We've got some clarity that we probably shouldn't speak on, but like there's before it's actually, permanent. But I think people who care about conservation and the environment will be very happy with the types of ideas that we're talking about. And they're not just like little crumbs to support public lands or to support wildlife or whatever. These are big steps, like historic achievements that could be celebrated by all. And that's the goal that we have. And it honestly, we want it to be a 4-year project that to Ben's comment earlier about one item, the wildlife corridors that went from Trump to Biden, that becomes a decade-long project of, presidents making this a priority every time they go into office, saying that they're going to work across the aisle to do it. And so this isn't just a 2025 thing. This is a multi-decade long thing. And so whatever we get done this year, we can build on next year and just keep making this a priority going forward.
How do you guys think about getting mental space within the administration and other folks right now, given everything else in the air, given all the other priorities, given, a clear mandate to cut costs? A lot of the things that folks that are interested in conservation wins are asking for is funding for the National Park Service backlog, or for grants to support habitat management, or for a million different things, right? A lot of this stuff costs money. And right now, for all sorts of reasons, there is cutting of staff, cutting of budgets, etc. How do we move the ball forward given that climate, like the political climate we're in around that? I could see that being particularly challenging. How do you guys envision that?
It hasn't been easy. I think in any first couple months of any administration, it wouldn't be easy. Obviously, President Trump has come in, for better or for worse, depending on how you look at it, like just with a huge amount of work that he's unloading onto different agencies and different people. And so it is a clouded room right now, obviously. I think it really speaks to our model, though, of showing the incentive of doing something on this. So, we are offering the ability for the president and Democrats and Republicans to achieve a historic win that is a legacy for all of them, right? That has celebrities and influencers that they look up to affiliated with it, that has America celebrating it, that has really good visuals and just like, a moment in time that they'll look back on and be proud of. And that's the sort of incentive that we're giving, right? We're giving them the grassroots, we're giving them the cultural, and we're giving them kind of like the personal legacy aspect. We're not going to them and saying, if you don't do this, the world's going to burn, or if you don't do this, we're going to come after you, or whatever. We're providing a very positive incentive. And yes, we haven't gotten through fully in the first 2 months to the point where I could tell you that we've already had all these accomplishments, but we made a ton of progress in 2 months with that more positive approach, with not just the Trump administration. I keep hammering on this, but like also Democrats as well, and Republicans, who are like so excited about this more incentive-based approach to do the right thing. And so that's how you got, I think over time, that just compounds and it allows you to build momentum, because every time, like, we're providing value to legislators to do the right thing, right? They will be rewarded for doing the right thing. So they want to do it. They want to have their picture taken, celebrating a massive success, so that they can tell their constituents and so that they can reach a new demographic of Americans. So this is kind of our model at work right away. We're launching, this spring, but we've already had this body of work that proves the model out, even in the first few months of this year. And I would just say that the other thing that people need to realize is that, in addition to sort of this incentive-based approach, the president and his team, again, whether you like it or not, are burning things down to try to balance the fiscal budget and kind of reset the government and all that stuff. They're not going to do that forever. They're going to want to build back with better, more efficient ways to do things, and that's a great opportunity for people who care about the environment to go and say, okay, this is how we rebuild conservation and make it more efficient and make it more effective and make it more balanced between private landowners and public landowners and ranchers and hunters and farmers and anglers and hikers, and like there's a way to kind of through the dust have it settle to a better outcome, because this isn't just like going to be dusty for the next 4 years. We are going to get through it, and then we're going to rebuild, and we're in a really good spot to be doing that, and fairly shortly.
One of the kind of tenets, I guess you could call it, of the approach I think you guys are taking, I've seen it listed on some documentation or your website somewhere, but this idea of utilizing and fostering big civic engagement. I'm curious if you could speak a little bit more about that, what that means and what that can mean at an individual level. So by that, I mean, for somebody listening right now, how can they act in such a way that they can be involved in big civic engagement that actually makes a difference? Because I think a lot of people that care about these things, that are hunters or anglers or climbers or bikers or whatever, and they love wild places and wildlife and clean air, clean water, all those things, a lot of the decisions made about that seem so outside of their influence and so beyond them that you can have this kind of throw your hands up in the air feeling sometimes because you don't seem like you have any agency. How do we reclaim that with big civic engagement? And I guess, Benji, I'll let you kick that one off, but I want to hear your thoughts too, Ben.
Yeah, and I'll let it go over to Ben too, because I've been talking a lot. But yeah, I would just say hyper specific is better. You think about all the different issues that we have in this country environmentally, and they're all, I think the environmental movement has been kind of difficult to make an impact with because they're so broad. It's we want climate action. Okay, well, what does that actually look like? Or we want public lands to be protected. Okay, what does that actually look like? Because each case by case example is different, right? If you're talking about a wetland in Georgia, it's a different need from a policy perspective than the deserts of Arizona where I live, right? So let's have advocacy around issues that people care about in a hyper specific way. If you care about wildlife corridors, have your legislator hear you on that. If you care about a national park being created in Georgia, which I was just reading about, instead of having it be a mine, advocate about that. Be as specific as possible about what you're for, because it allows your legislator to actually do something about it. Oh, we want you to care about the environment. Okay, what that kind of they still hear it and they still care to hear it, but they don't really know what to do about that. And the more that people can hear about specific initiatives, the better. So I think that's where we're going to try to really build out our model for people, is allow people to advocate for specific issues that they care about. Some people care about climate change. Some people care about clean energy. Some people care about hunting and fishing, and some people care about ecosystem restoration, and some people care about none of those things, right? So trying to make it as easy as possible, because everyone's why for caring about the environment is somewhat different, and advocating for something that you personally care about rather than trying to do some broad push, A, will get more people involved, but B, will make it a lot more effective. Ben?
Yeah, I think you put it really well, Benji. But I love that idea of big citizenship. And I think, it's originally kind of coined as a counter, a foil to big government. But when I talk about big citizenship, just in the last couple of months, I guess it goes back a few more months than a couple of months, but we've talked to Senator Martin Heinrich, also talked to, Vice President J.D. Vance, that really espouse the importance of it and sees tremendous value in it. I saw Secretary Burgum a few weeks back, and he made a comment about nobody loves the habitat or the wildlife of North Dakota more than the management authorities there in North Dakota. All these folks can come and visit, but they don't have that appreciation. So what that means to say is, people love their backyards more. more than anybody else, and there's real untapped potential there. And we're looking at, the administration as it stands today, where it's really, considering the role of government, and what it plays, and how it should be deployed, and they're really looking towards empowering states, empowering local communities. What does that mean? How do we have policies that really allow for folks to be more front and center, in direct hands-on stewardship, like Good Samaritan law, and how that's implemented. So I think that's a really big one where we have a huge opportunity, and talking, with folks that are working on the celebration, the 250th birthday celebration. It's going to be one of the core pillars of it is volunteerism, is service. I think that, for our needs on our public lands, on our private lands, in our environment, I think that plays a direct role where we can really step up and fill in.
Yeah.
I mean, just quickly on like, let's just take forest management, for example. The need for civic leadership is obviously critical to like make forest management and better care of our forests happen from a policy standpoint. But what Ben was just talking about, for the government to empower local communities to help take care of those forests, right? For states to be involved. It's not for states to go clear cut it. I think that's like the misnomer. Like there's a middle ground between like selling off public land, which is not what we're advocating for, and like letting local stakeholders have more of a stake in it, right? Have more of a voice. So that sort of like involvement from like everything for the environmental community has seemed like it's come from DC and been told by DC to as a directive to the people. And what I think we can do with this more like civic leadership, big civic leadership idea is try to make environmentalism and conservation a truly all-American thing again. Something that we all share and are all involved with, whether that be because you're involved with your local gardening club or because you're a local forest firefighter, or you are a duck hunter who's helped restoring a habitat in coastal Louisiana, or you're a trash picker upper at a beach in Florida. That sort of leadership is what actually makes changes for the environment rather than like trying to rely all on DC. And I think the more that we can involve all Americans in this, the better.
Yeah. And man, that on the ground local work not only makes, not only does it make a difference to the specific cause that you're working on, but it also does a whole lot for your peace of mind, your state of mind, your sense of agency, the feeling that, okay, I actually can do something. I was just this past weekend down in Kentucky volunteering on the Daniel Boone National Forest. We planted 1,300 trees on the National Forest, cool. And I felt a whole lot more effective on that one day than I felt in weeks making phone calls or sending emails. So a little bit of on the ground work is just very good therapy, let alone just tangibly good too. Now that said, the phone calls, the emails, needing both. Exactly. So Ben, you worked in the Department of the Interior. You were involved with the previous administration. For people who want to be more effective at communicating with their elected officials or folks, what makes effective communication? What makes for a public comment or a phone call or whatever communication method we're talking about? How do you actually get through and make a difference? Benji mentioned a few things earlier, but I'm curious from, given your experience there, if we want to either advocate for an issue or against a particular thing, how do we be more effective as individuals in doing that?
Okay. So my take on it is government is huge, right? It's massive. So it doesn't have the ability sometimes to get down to the level of just a single individual person. So I believe that there's always power in numbers. I don't want to be a total like salesman for like NGOs, but I've experienced it firsthand when people cobble together, as a group, and have like thoughtful comments and send them over, that they're better received. So I think like it depends on what you care about, right, in terms of issues, but there's always a group out there that you can trust, that tells it like it is, and going with them to get your comments through. And I think that's a really big piece of like what we're building with Nature Nonpartisan is that large mass of people, that we're going to tell them, like it is, where the opportunities are, and be able to interface with government, letting them know where, a mass of folks stand.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think like you need a vehicle, whether that be a local group or a national group, to help kind of with the power and numbers thing. I've talked to members of Congress, especially who, and I think state legislators, it's very similar, who hate being called out specifically on social media, like they read everything. And so I think like I would actually flip that and say, how about, I mean, people should, as an organization, we are going to be for things like we talked about earlier. But I mean, if you can reward people too for doing the right thing on social media, provide an echo chamber of support when they do the right thing, it's even more powerful. Sometimes if you're on the other side, you say, hey, I didn't vote for you, but I really appreciate that you did this. Like even just that sort of thing. And obviously if it's from your own side, it's great too. So I think it's a mixture of not just like pushing against people, but pushing for people and joining like, organizations that can represent your values. And that's actually kind of full circle of why Nature's Nonpartisan exists, which is that there is really no organization that I believe someone could join. And I'm not trying to throw my NGO friends under the bus here, but like that advocates for the environment in a way that actually represents the whole of America. Like I can't think of anybody. And again, it's not a knock, but it also used to exist. So it can exist. It's proof that it can exist. And we are going to do what Ben just described to try to make sure that everyone's represented at the table and that we make it easy, right? Like people don't have enough time to go and advocate like you and I might because it's partially our job, but it's 100% my job. So but it's our job as an organization to represent the people that are part of our network. And so if people have 60-hour work weeks and kids at home, that they can be part of Nature's Nonpartisan, but we can help represent them if they don't have the time to advocate for themselves. So I think it's a mixture of both.
Yeah. So tell me this, over the next 12 months or so, today when this podcast drops, it will be the launch date of the organization, the public launch day of the organization. So over the next 12 months, what does involvement with Nature is Nonpartisan look like for an individual? So someone listening right now, if they were to head over to your website and, pop in their email address, sign the pledge, whatever, what would their engagement with your organization look like over this next year? What are you going to ask of them and or provide them and or have them be aware of over this next year?
Well, it's a really good question, and we're going to build this out a lot over the next couple months. But there's two clear reasons to join us from a logistical standpoint, and then also from a mission standpoint, which is already clear. So from the logistical standpoint, we are going to do two things. One, we are going to have a really easy to use advocacy hub that allows people to advocate for the issues that they specifically care about to elected officials and make it super seamless, not a lot of steps, and again, tailored to their issues that they care about. Second, we also are going to connect them with aligned center left, center, and center right nonprofits that are tailored to them as well if they choose. They don't need to be connected to another nonprofit if if they don't want to be. But if there's a local group in your area that's doing amazing work and is truly living up to the nonpartisan ethos and actually doing the on the ground work and you want to work with them, we're going to help you find them. So that's kind of like, those are the two things: our advocacy hub and helping connect you to other groups as well that are more on the ground than us as a national group. So that both of those I don't think really exist. Advocacy is really hard right now. It's kind of difficult to even find a way to do it in your own authentic way. We're going to fix that. And then it's also really hard to find other groups too, and we're going to fix that. But the other thing that sets us apart is that we are the only national group that's working on this stuff that is truly trying to do this from a nonpartisan standpoint. Everything we do will be evenly split, conservative to liberal. There's no other organization that has that intention. And so if you want to join an organization to advocate, to learn, to celebrate wins, to get things done, all the things that we're going to do, and you want to know for sure that they are actively balancing the political spectrum to get just good results. That's how you get good results, is when you have a collaboration of ideas. This is your home. And if you don't want that, if you want to play partisan politics, this is not your place. And, we don't want radical right and radical left people who are part of the problem. We want the 80% of America. They can be conservative, they can be liberal, they can be proud Republicans and proud Democrats. But on this issue, they're willing to understand that we have a common goal. And to get to the common goal, we have to work with each other. And that doesn't mean compromising your values. It means coming to a solution that works for everybody to the best of its ability. And that's something that will set us apart from everyone else, in addition to those kind of like nuts and bolts advocacy things.
Yeah. Would you add anything to that, Ben?
No, just having a hub too to just show, where the issues lie and where the solutions are being provided. And again, it's telling people how they can engage, right? How they can do something proactive and be a part of the solution. Because again, yeah, it's like depending on where you are on the spectrum, like some people are just saying, I want to sit out. I feel like my voice doesn't matter, So this is creating a space where no, we found the common ground. We found an item that you can push and make great progress on, and it'll make a difference to feel it that you'll feel at home.
Yeah. So imagine this. Imagine we are a little bit less than 4 years in the future. The next election is coming around. People are debating everything all over again, and you know how it goes. I'm wondering if you can imagine that time period in a world in which nature is nonpartisan has been a wild success, in which you have achieved your goals as much as you possibly could in 3.5 years or so. And you are sitting there looking back on what you accomplished from now until then. What would have gotten done? What would that future look like if that were to actually play out? And I'll let Ben, you lead with that one, and then Benji, you can have the final word.
Yeah, a successful 4 years is having folks that can look back and know that they were a part in achieving restored and thriving ecosystems, resilient, healthy, abundant wildlife, that they were an active participant in democracy, in seeing greater protections happen, and in a better future for our wild places and our wild things. Uh, and and then from there, saying we're not going to stop. We're going to get our friends to join as well, and we're going to continue to make the difference, no matter who sits in the White House, no matter who's in Congress. And it will completely change the way the environment is talked about and approached. The whole shift in the dialogue.
Yeah, and to build on that, I think we'd love to see historic bipartisan achievements, things that you could look back on, like you could look back on the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, Endangered Species Act. Obviously, those were long lasting, and they do need some amendment, I think. But like they've lasted 50-ish years because they were bipartisan, right? So, and they were massive landmark achievements. I think we could accomplish a few of those, and I would really like to see that happen. I'd also love to be able to ask the average person on the street, do you see the environment as a partisan issue in America right now? And have them say no. Because right now it would be an absolute yes. And that is something that we all know. And it's trackable just by the fact that we all know it. And I think we unanimously should be able to say that that's not true any longer by the end of the next 4 years. And then I would also just say that this becomes the norm in policy, right? Like, I think back to when I went to Richard Nixon's library to speak about my book about a year ago, and one of his old campaign team members, one of his young aides, who's still alive, was there, and he was showing me the campaign booklet where the environment was listed last in the campaign booklet, and I asked him, why is this listed last? You guys had some of the biggest environmental achievements in American history. And he said, because it was an expectation that Americans had for us to lead on it. We didn't need to campaign on it as our top issue because people knew that we would work on it either way, and that if we didn't, we'd be held accountable, and if we did, we'd be rewarded. That needs to be the norm very soon. And not to say that we don't debate it, not to say it's not a priority, because it absolutely needs to be. But in 2028, could Nature's Nonpartisan host a presidential debate about the environment and conservation, and they're debating the solutions like they used to? That would be an awesome norm to have. And I think it's very reasonable to get there in that short amount of time.
Yeah. I would love for that to be the case. I would love to see both sides legitimately debating solutions with creative and innovative solutions on both sides. And we can find what the middle ground is, but everyone at the table on that would be tremendous. And I think as we've all been discussing here, a big part of making that happen is from us as individuals and organizations showing our lawmakers that this matters that much, that it should be a priority, that it should be discussed and prioritized, that it's not just some, backwater issue, but something that is, something you can get elected on. And we've got to show them that, with whether it be the stick or the carrot, whatever approach you want to take. In your guys' approach, the carrot is a very effective approach. And man, I'm excited about it. So if people listening to this are also excited about it, can you walk me through, Benji, where they can learn more about you guys, how they can get involved, and what to expect in the short term?
Well, I appreciate that a lot. I don't think that we meet the goals that you just outlined, or the goals that Ben and I outlined, without Nature is Nonpartisan existing. This will be a movement for every American, and not just, a select few. And I think that that's it. I kind of wish I would have, started this 5 or 10 years ago, or someone else had, but we're going to make this happen very quickly. And so we need people. We need Americans to be part of our movement. And so, and each individual is going to be critical for this, because each part of the country has a different need in terms of action, like we talked about earlier. So to get involved, we're going to keep building out our model over the next few months. But currently, we've got our pledge signed online, the Nature is Nonpartisan pledge. That's kind of the initial interest form of, like, you want to be involved with Nature is Nonpartisan, as we're building out the rest of the more robust tools. That can be found on natureisnonpartisan.org. We're on social media. If you search Nature is Nonpartisan on all the platforms, and really just stay in touch, because we're going to have a lot coming out over the next 3 to 6 months, and you're not going to want to miss it. It will be really helpful if you care about this stuff, and no matter which side of the aisle you come at it from, or what topic you come at it from. And, stick with us as we build, I think, the most effective environmental movement we'll ever see. And, it's going to take all of us to do that. It's not just going to be Ben or I or you, Mark. It's going to be all of us, and collectively, we're going to get this thing done. So we need people. We need individuals who care about this, who want to put partisan politics aside and actually find solutions. And we're starting now, and we need you now.
Well, I'm certainly appreciative of you guys doing this, leading the charge. I'm excited about it, and I think a lot of other folks will be too. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, and that's a wrap for our show today. Hope you guys enjoyed this one and left a little bit better informed on how we can move the ball forward for the natural resources and wildlife and wild places that we care about right now, how we can find some wins, how we can, encourage our elected officials to do the right thing, and how we can find those areas of shared values between, the left side and the right side, and get something done. It's not always going to be perfect. It's not always going to be everything we want, but let's get some wins. Let's find some silver linings. Let's make sure that we are getting good things done for the wildlife, the wild places, and the wild experiences that so many of us care about. So until next time, thank you for being here, and stay wired to hunt.